Nilou shall send enemies dancing into their graves, and today I'm going to tell you how to build her best. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Which set exactly does Twinkle Toes over here use best? Well, 2-piece HP percent plus 2-piece HP percent is actually going to be your best in slot. Yes, a 2-piece combo is genuinely the most efficient way to build her. This is mostly due to her A4, which is a team-wide buff that buffs the damage that everyone's bountiful cores do based on Nilou's HP. This buff caps out at exactly 74,444 HP, which is a lot, so this 2-piece set helps you achieve that goal more easily. However, 4-piece Flowers of Paradise Lost is still valuable. The 2-piece's EM is appreciated, and so is the 4-piece's bloom damage increase, which does apply to bountiful cores. HP is so valuable on Nilou to the point where, while the set comes close, it's still slightly beaten up at the 2-piece, but if you somehow manage to get 75k HP through other means, then that's when this set will become better, but that's almost impossible to achieve without perfect substat rolls. Also, Nilou herself isn't going to proc many blooms, so focusing on her personal blooms is less efficient than just building HP. 4-piece Gilded Dreams is also pretty neat as an elemental mastery stick. However, attack percent buffs are basically almost always useless in bloom teams, so you really are just using it for the EM. Plus, if you're running solo Dendro, you only get 50 extra EM from the A4 as opposed to 100, so the value of this set can decrease even then. It'll work, but I wouldn't go out of your way to specifically farm for it. Works if you already own it. 2-piece HP percent plus 2-piece EM is also highly formidable, since Nilou does like EM for when she triggers her own blooms, but replacing the EM for HP will be stronger. Noticing a trend here? And yes, 2-piece EM is viable, however once again, chase HP percent if you can. Main stats are literally as simple as it gets. Go for HP percent, HP percent, HP percent. When it comes to Nilou, your primary goal is literally always just to stack HP until you can cap out her HP-based A4 buff. There's no solid reason to go for alternatives. For those curious, here's the damage difference between a Nilou with 50k HP, 60k HP, and 70k HP. Pretty drastic, right? As for substats, you know the drill. ER is much lower priority since you don't tend to use Nilou's burst every rotation, so you'll tend to have it up when needed. EM is solid on Nilou since her own cores can be strong if you're playing her own key, in which she gives herself 2.25 EM sounds worth of EM. I'll touch on that soon. Although Nilou's burst isn't that vital, which I'll cover later on, her stats are not difficult to farm for, so you'll most likely end up with some ER on the side anyway. It's pretty obvious to just stick to the easy 2-piece combo instead of going out of your way to spend resin on a full 4-piece set that you don't need. It's all about reaching that A4 threshold, man. I'll repeat it till you never even think of forgetting it. Think of forgetting it? That makes sense. Anyways. A dancer needs props, and Nilou's props just so happen to have some destructive qualities. Let's discuss. R1 key of Kaj Nisut is obviously her best in slot. Not only does it dump her with a truckload of HP, but the passive is absolutely broken. As I stated in my previous video about Nilou, a 75,000 HP Nilou gives herself 420 EM, including the second part of the passive, which is 46 more than double in EM sounds. And she gives her whole team 150 EM on that same amount of HP. And if your Nilou's at 60k HP, that's 336 EM for Nilou and 120 EM for the team. So even if we lowball, you're getting an absurd amount of EM stats. Key is amazing because it essentially covers the EM you aren't building on Nilou based due to her A4 and allows you to work towards maxing it out while making her own bountiful cores more impactful. By signature weapon standards, Key is incredible and is the key to unlocking peak potential Nilou. Ha ha ha. Also, Key makes an on-field Nilou more viable because she'll be generating more of her own bloom cores compared to off-fielding, and all that EM makes running on-field Nilou more worth your time, because her cores are just that much stronger with all of Key's EM buffs. Your next best bet will be Dockhand's Assistant. Kind of a rare 4-star weapon since it's a gacha exclusive, however its strength is undeniable. It's the only 4-star sword in the game with a large HP percent main stat, and can provide Nilou herself up to 120 EM. It's not as impressive as Key since the EM buff is not team-wide, however this is still extremely formidable and worth your time if you have it. Free to play is fear not, since craftable Iron Sting is still quite solid on Nilou despite not featuring any HP within it. You won't be reaching the HP caps of this weapon, but the EM still adds value to Nilou's own blooms. Unfortunately, the passive does not affect bloom core since damage bonus percent doesn't help bloom at all. Tukabu Shigure is in a similar situation where it's a free-to-play friendly EM stick option, worth using if you have it to save having to craft and level Iron Sting. Zephos' Moonlight is a neat way to give some ER to everybody in the team via Nilou, though she doesn't primarily build EM so it won't be much. While this improves with refinements greatly, Zephos is quite rare and I'd say chasing it would be as hard as chasing Key at that stage. Plus, it has been on both Key reruns so far, so if you have Zephos you probably already have or are trying to get Key. Aside from that, the EM stick is nice, and it at least has some solid utility. Freedom Sworn is once again another EM stick for Nilou. Don't pull it deliberately for her, but it works if you got it accidentally and don't have a key. However, Tukaboo and Sting are essentially close to equal because all three have worthless passives for Nilou. Freedom Sworn only wins because it has a little more EM than both. I'd argue even Zephos to be more valuable at higher Zephos refinements. Also, don't sleep on the Dark Iron Sword. Yes, the passive literally specifically does not mention Bloom, most likely because an attack percent buff is useless for that anyway, but 141 EM for such low resources is very efficient, and it's only 24 EM points lower than Iron Sting, who is an equally useless passive, so you can save some resources that way and give this rare weapon a proper use case if you'd like. Sapwood Blade is craftable, though Nilou doesn't really want all that ER percent. You'd only be using this for the bit of EM that the passive provides. Just craft Iron Sting at that stage, there's no reason to pick Sapwood over it, honestly. Not to mention how you have to actually go grab a leaf in the overworld like Woba's attack buff pepper, so you could accidentally miss out on the passive, rendering this choice useless. Sacrificial, while the ER percent is worthless, you're able to use both of Nilou's skill states within one rotation. It's not really worth using it over the EM based budget options, however if you want to have gimmick fun then go for it. Good if you're running Yelan with her, gives Nilou herself more Hydra application, but is useless if you're running someone like Kokomi with high Hydra application. When it comes to Nilou's weapons, HP percent and EM are everything. Key and Dock Hands are genuinely miles ahead of the competition on the whole, and anything else can only dream of matching them. Nilou is still strong and competent on other choices of course, she is amazing with something like Sting and becomes groundbreaking with Key or Dock Hands. That's how I see it. Nilou's teams aren't as niche as you think. Almost every Hydro and Dendro in this game is viable with her, and as long as you have enough Dendro application and healing in your Nilou teams, basically any team comp will work. So I'll go through every Hydro and Dendro she uses, why they work with her, and then provide some of her best example teams at the end. But as long as you're filling those prerequisites, you'll be fine. I'll start with Kokomi because she's one of Nilou's best Hydro teammates in my opinion. She synergizes amazingly with Nilou by on-filling to apply Hydro, which triggers more blooms, and healing back the insane self-damage that bloom cores bring about. Amazing Nilou teammate. Yelan works to help Nilou in single target scenarios where bountiful cores are weaker, and her contributions here are pretty incredible. Though Yelan's ramping damage bonus percent doesn't have much of a place here, she also adds some nifty overall team DPS. Xingqiu is the utility-based version of that, being able to do some minor heals, not to mention his high Hydra application. However, his damage contributions will be a lot less than Yelan's. Furina can work with Nilou, but I personally find the synergy to be a bit irritating because Furina drains HP in a team, which is already pretty shaky on HP. Also, damage bonus percent doesn't buff transformatives such as Bountiful Core blooms, therefore Furina's main gimmick is being wasted. She only buffs herself here, but if you're playing in an Alhaitham Nilou team, then she can buff Alhaitham's contributions up. Noivellec can work in Bloom, though he works pretty much anywhere. Using him in Bloom mostly works because Noive himself is busted. Plus, dude has a massive range. Ayato can build full EM and on-field drive in a Nilou team, helping to trigger more blooms as the Hydro on-fielder. However, do note that you're not really getting much out of Ayato's personal damage here, still a decent use case for him though. Barbara can on-field with her normals and charge attacks when her skill is active. She's mostly just a really solid budget Kokomi that's honestly better than you'd expect her to be, built on full EM and is also capable of triggering a decent amount of blooms. Candace can infuse your on-fielder's attacks with Hydro so that you can trigger more blooms on field. It's one of Candace's few really solid use cases and is especially useful when paired with the likes of Yao Yao for example. Speaking of which, Dendro. Nahida's Dendro application is second to none and is easily the best Dendro choice for Nilou. She can act as a solo Dendro within these comps due to the sheer amount of Dendro that she applies, and the EM buff she grants is fantastic. Plus, being a Dendro catalyst is mega bonus points. Great unit for Nilou, would absolutely recommend. Going from Nilou without Nahida to Nilou with Nahida is like night and day. You'll never even think of wanting to look back. Baiju can replace Kokomi and Yao Yao as her Dendro healer, can apply Dendro himself as the catalyst, and has some Bloom buffing within his kit, which is very nice. Great kit for Bloom, and is highly viable if you own him. Yao Yao is a great pair of Candace, especially as she applies so much Dendro on field with her burst, allowing her to trigger a ton of blooms at once. And with Candace's help, she can drive even more blooms all at once. Insane healing and is shockingly good for a budget option. DMC isn't quite the storm that is approaching, but they are a solid free-to-play Dendro applicator. However, you'd have to play them next to another Dendro so that you'd have enough Dendro to keep Bountiful Cores consistent. That's where Kale comes in. The actual strength for the Dendro she applies is awkward because she has a special ICD for her Dendro application, and unfortunately the range in which she applies it is quite small, which I'm not a huge fan of, but she's a viable free-to-play pick nevertheless. Kirara can protect you from Bloom self-damage while also serving up some cores of her own, but since she builds HP, they won't be that strong. Good comfort option. Kirara is also capable of driving teams with her box form. Alhaitham's Bloom comp of Nilou is quite strong in AoE, and while I prefer Alhaitham Quick Bloom, this team variant of Nilou is a great way for Nilou herself to gain a leg up in single target, while also adding value to Farina within Nilou teams. Avoid Kaveh because it completely ruins the fluid nature of Bloom team's rotations while offering nothing in return. He also applies Dendro as fast as a grandfather tells you about his time going to the supermarket yesterday, so I'd steer clear. Now for some example teams. Kokomi, Nilou, Yelan, Nahida. Ayato, Nilou, Nahida, Baiju. Alhaitham, Nilou, Farina, Baiju. Yao Yao, Nilou, Candice, Nahida. Noivalet, Nilou, Nahida, Baiju. Just smash any of the units I mentioned together with a healer and a Nahida, and you will more than likely pop out on the other side with a nice competent Bloom team. Fun fact, you can gain Nilou's application ring early if you skill, normal, and then skill again. Then you get her Hydro ring nice and quick. And you usually avoid Nilou's burst most times because while Nilou triggering her own blooms is a good thing, there's almost always something else you could do with your rotations which would give you more blooms, such as on-fielding with Kokomi's burst, using Nahida, refreshing Yelan, just as examples. But if you have nothing left to do in your rotation, then Nilou's burst becomes formidable and worth your time. Now for the wonderful ways of this dancer. Her normals on their own perform 3 basic physical strikes. Okay. Her skill, however. You press it multiple times, and on the third press, you'll enter one of 2 states. State 1 will infuse Nilou's normal attacks of Hydro, and State 2 will create a big water ring around Nilou which applies Hydro to nearby enemies. You enter State 1 if your normal attack is the third input after Nilou's skill is activated, so skill, do whatever for 2 attacks, then normal attack, then voila, Hydro normals. And you enter State 2 if you use her skill as the third input after her skill application, then she gains the Hydro ring. Neat! Her burst is a large AoE blast of Hydro that has the primary application of generating Bloom cores, yet I've already went over why this is situational. Now for Ascension passives. Nilou's A1 gives everyone 100 EM for 10 seconds when they get hit by Dendro, aka self-damaging cores, and is also what enables the Bountiful Cores reaction. When there's only Hydros and Dendros in her team, she modifies the cores to do more damage and have a larger AoE. It also has a 30-second duration which is independent of the skill, which is very cool. Her A4 provides a damage dealt increase to the cores that your teammates produce based on her max HP above 30k, and this caps out at exactly 74,444 HP. Neat stuff, and is also the main reason why you want to stack so much HP on Nilou. As for talent priorities, none. Leave all her abilities at level 1, because Nilou's own scalings don't matter towards blooms, nor does she build any crit. If you want to see Nilou's next dance, then you gotta pay the entry fee. Let's talk Constellations. This isn't bad, but it's nothing necessary, cool if you get it, and is pretty quality of life on the whole, decent C1. Very nice C2, quite strong for individual teams, though I will say that you still want Nahida C2 before Nilou's on C2. Burst up by +3 doesn't matter because Nilou's scalings are irrelevant. This one makes her burst much more relevant, and while most C4s tend to be kinda garbage, this one's not half bad, though don't go out of your way for it. More useless scalings, nothing much for me to add here. This turns Nilou into a nuclear speedrunning vape DPS. This is one of the better C6s that you can get for sure. Very formidable and well worth your time if you're an aspiring whale that wants to watch the world explode. It also reinvents the wheel with her playstyle by making Nilou crit based. Honestly, Nilou's got really decent Primogen based high investment. Go for C2 Nahida first, then R1 Nisut, then C2 Nilou, then all in for C6 if you're interested. Nilou, to this day, is still a very powerful Hydro who is a godsend to the free-to-play world, and will still make a splash on highly invested accounts. I think she's aged really well and is near the top of the AoE game, and if you need a solid AoE character that requires little to no investment while also being one of the game's only reaction modifiers, Nilou's the right lass for the job. Hopefully this video was able to tell you how to get your Nilou drop-kicking enemies off the stage. This has been Juice, signing out, and I also want to try that triangle thing she's eating. It looks like a hash brown.